I was fortunate to do tests on the predecessor of Optimus Nova for the military already back in the 90s. I'm Magnus Collin from jaktkit. If you watch this video and you are lucky, you might in fact learn something. In this video we will look at some tweaks and tricks that you can do. We will discuss different fuels that you can use and which fuels not to use. We will light the stove to see how to do this in a good way, and we will discuss why I find the Optimus Nova a very good multi-fuel among many. The first thing I recommend is to mitten-proof your stove. That is to put on the gloves or mittens that you will typically use during the expedition, and then you work with your stove to find out which things are easy to do and which ones are tricky to do.
Cold is that crisp, refreshing feeling that makes the fingers fall off of the unprepared.
I have found out that sometimes it's useful to add a small extra toggle, which makes it more easy to hold when you're opening and closing the stove. I have also permanently closed the zipper along the side because I found out that it's more easy to load everything from the top. In this old bag they had included some interior pockets. I found that they were always tangling the equipment, so I took them out. This set also comes with a multi-tool. I think it's wise to connect this to something so that you don't drop it in the snow, because this tool is very useful when you need it. The spare part kit I would typically not store in the bag. Instead I would put it along with the medical supply or other sensitive equipment that you store separately. The foil that comes with the wind foil, it looks quite simplistic, but it really works, and I found this steady type more easy to use than the ones which are of separate foldable parts that moves much more. To get a good support in the snow, you need something beneath the stove. I suggest that you use an aluminium foil that you can get as a pie form from the supermarket. These exist in many different sizes, and you can choose the one you think is suitable. But it's better to go a little big than too small, because if you use too small, the stove will start to sink down in the snow, which is very inconvenient when you're cooking. When you take the bottle out for tour, you will always keep the pump in the bottle to avoid fuel spill and inconvenience. It's very suggestible to add a cover to protect the pump, particularly during transportation. It doesn't really matter if you come in with a parachute into your camp or whether you are landing with commercial flight. The baggage handling is pretty much as rough on either case these days. I see many outdoor people using these miniature pots. I don't really understand why. I suggest getting a sufficient pot set. Important thing is that the base plate is sufficiently big. If you have a small base plate, a lot of the heat will disappear on the side of the pot instead of in fact heating the water or the food that you have in the pot. When you're melting snow, I suggest that you get a pot that is at least 1.5 liters. Otherwise you will not end up with very much water in the end, and it will take forever to fill your thermos. When trying to melt snow, you should always save a little water from previous cooking to start with. This fasten the melting process and get your water much faster. I find it much more easy to light the stove with a knife and a fire striker. It's a very easy and convenient way to do it, and you can do this with the gloves on. I see a lot of people priming with the main fuel. I don't find it's a good practice. Instead, you should prime with alcohol, ethanol. This is a very clean fuel that will not put dirt in the nozzle or in the stove as such. Then your stove will require a lot less maintenance. As the main fuel, you should use kerosene. In this I include jet fuel, charcoal fluid, barbecue fluid, lamp oil. All of these have a structure with C10 to C20, and they are very well defined so that your stove will burn consistently over time. On the other hand, you should not use Coleman fuel, white gas, Aspen 4-stroke alkylate fuel, or Primus power fuel, or other naphtha products. They are much less defined. They will not be consistent over time. They are composed of mainly short carbon structures. The short carbon structures will more easily penetrate your skin, so it increases the risk of cancer. It might not be a big deal for the occasional camper, but it's worth considering. It's also a much more volatile fuel. Particularly in cold weather, it can behave very unpredictable. Finally, and most importantly, it's a solvent, so it will dry out all your O-rings, your plastic and other sensitive parts, and this will force you to maintain your stove a lot more, and it increases the risk of breaking the pump and other parts during your expedition. Another thing that sometimes comes up is these LP gas canisters. Together with a summer stove, it might be convenient, it might be a lightweight setup in total. But when you combine it with this heavy winter stove, it's an awful lot of weight for the fuel that you get out of it. There are numerous videos about how to use a multi-fuel stove, so I will mainly focus on the small parts that I make perhaps different. The first thing I will do is to give the stove a good shake. This will clean the nozzle properly, so I start with a good clean burner. I make sure that the valve is properly closed. I then connect the hose. I make sure that this valve is open. Is the valve on the bottle. I make also sure that the bottle is on, and give it 20-25 pounds. The biggest difference is that we now use the alcohol as primer, not the main fuel. This will give an altogether cleaner priming that keep the nozzle and the general stove clean and free from soot. This alcohol is even usable for inside lamps, so it burns very clean. There are many really good multi-fuel stoves. The reason why I particularly like the Nova stove is because it has mainly metal parts, which feels very durable when you are in a cold and difficult environment. It's also very easy to clean. If you have taken it apart a few times at home, you can easily strip it also in the field. By turning the bottle, you are able to empty the fuel line. This is also convenient, so that you don't have to have leakage in your backpack. Many like the Polaris. I would always choose the Optimus Nova. It's more dedicated for heavy fuel, like kerosene. The Polaris, on the other hand, need to compromise to also facilitate LP gas. I now light the main fuel. It's a good practice to start with a quite moderate flame until it gets really red. If I had had a pot on top, it would have heated much faster. But now I don't have the windshield and I don't have the pot, so it will take a little bit longer. But already now you can see that the flame is basically completely blue. And if I had had the pot on, it would have been completely blue. There is also no tendency to soot at all. So as long as you refrain from priming with kerosene, kerosene is a very nice and clean fuel for a multi-fuel stove. Yes, this is how simple it is. And when you have finished cooking or almost finished cooking, you just turn it to the off position. And this will empty the whole system. When I turn it, I typically have about 1 minute of cooking time left. So you can turn it when the food is almost ready or when the water is pretty much boiling. One thing to consider, and that is a known issue with these stoves, is the fuel filter. You should open the filter when you get one of these stoves and verify which one you have. If it is the metal filter that is gold color, it will be typically fine. But if you have the white filter, you should try to replace it. They are very prone to issues. Typical issues is that the fuel is restricted, it will require excessive pumping, the flame is very much pulsating, or other issues that make the stove underperform. So whenever you see an issue, check the fuel filter. It can easily be replaced by a cotton bud. You take the fluff from a cotton bud and you put it where the filter should be. It works completely fine. And when you use a clean fuel, you never have any problems. You can replace it every 5 years or something. It works fine. The stove in its correct environment. This is everything I had for this video. If you liked it, leave a comment, give a thumbs up, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Stay frosty.